Another day, another dollar, and our certified financial planner professional, Kurt Baker, will give you the tips you need to turn that single into a sea of green with Master Your Finances. Whether you have enough to get by or too much in your pockets, Kurt Baker and his weekly guests are here to show you how to manage it all. Master Your Finances is underwritten by Certified Wealth Management and Investment LLC. Now listen up, because it's time to get a hold of those money matters and master your finances.
Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management Investment. I'm Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional located in Princeton, New Jersey. I can be reached through our website, which is www.cwmi.us, or you can call me directly at 609-716-4700. And this week, we're very pleased to have with us Robert, also known as Bob Kull, who is a licensed New Jersey professional planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And he's the event manager at 1867 Sanctuary Arts and Culture Center at Preservation, New Jersey. He is a state licensed and nationally certified planner by profession in the field of land use and public policy. Born and raised in his early years in Teaneck, Bergen County, New Jersey, a suburb known for creating a system of small neighborhood parks and playgrounds. Coming of age in the racial and economic unrest of the late 60s and Earth Day in the 70s, Bob pursued a degree in environmental science and policy at the University of Pennsylvania and a Master of City and Regional Planning at Rutgers. His career in state, county, and local government, multinational corporate, and nonprofit organizations produced many plans, programs, and awards. He's a resident of Ewing, and Bob serves as chair of the Ewing Township Redevelopment Agency. This is really you got a lot of experience here, it sounds like, throughout the years on all kinds of levels. So what made you want to, I mean, I see you had the unrest of the 60s and 70s, so that was an interest. I was pretty young at that time. Maybe you're a couple of years older than me, but I just remember I was born in 1960, so I was young when the 60s kind of happened, but I remember the 70s. So there's a lot going on back then. Right. Is that kind of what made you decide to kind of go into the planning aspect of things? Is that?
Yeah, I was concerned about, how can we make the world a better place? And so one of the ways that the town that I grew up in, Teaneck, was known for its small neighborhood parks. And eventually I came to know that that was intentional, to have these places for people where people can gather and people can get out of their houses and mix. And as we looked at how do we deal with these problems, that I found that the places that seem to work best are places that have an identifiable place. We identify ourselves by we're from Trenton, or we're from Princeton, or we're from Lawrenceville, or Yardville, places that aren't even the names of towns. Mm-hmm. It's kind of our neighborhoods and communities, and that's how we look to the architecture and the relationships among people that happen in those places. And some of that is a result of how the neighborhoods are built. So the planning and the environmental protection as part of that planning attracted me as a career to go to. And when I worked with a state in a regional planning effort, we called it communities of place, that we can have successful communities if they have a placeness, whether it be a large regional center or a city or a town or a village or even a crossroads hamlet. That's what people identify with, and they'll invest in that, and the property values in that area will tend to be higher.
Oh, it's kind of interesting. I know that over the years, as an example, in our town, Plainsboro, they actually, and we're part of suburbia, right? So yes. you have New York City and you have Philadelphia, and then people just started building houses all over the place, but there was really no connectivity. So we literally had this piece of land in the middle of Plainsboro that they really weren't sure what to do, called the Cooper Track. I remember when I first moved here, I was like, why is this huge piece of vacant land in the middle of the town? And it turned out they were trying to figure out how to best utilize it, and ultimately they ended up putting a town center, mm-hmm. which is kind of an interesting, it's like an afterthought, whereas I guess in the days of Teaneck, they had kind of planned it that way, it sounds like, whereas when you got suburbia, everybody literally needed to get a car to go see a lot of their neighbors because they were so spread out. Everybody had a pretty good sized lot. You really couldn't walk to a lot of your friends. You had to have other types of modes of transportation. It wasn't easy necessarily get from one place to another. And I know when I moved from Florida, one thing I noticed was there weren't a lot of bike paths. There weren't a lot of ways to actually get somewhere, especially as a young person where I couldn't drive, right? If you couldn't drive, things like that. So is that kind of what you're,
Those
am
are
I
all part of
understanding
the
that
mix.
right?
Yep. And so yeah, we're pleased that also the county has invested in a bike path along Scotch Road. So that's another way to get to the 1867 sanctuary.
Right.
But that's the project that I'm involved in, and I was inspired by a book by Dara Williams, the singer and songwriter, who wrote a book, What I Found in 1,000 Towns. And she calls it A Traveling Musician's Guide to Rebuilding America's Communities, one coffee shop, dog run, and open mic night at a time, with the idea that she observed in Beacon, New York, in Lowell, Massachusetts, Phoenixville, PA, and other places that were getting run down, that as people established these kind of gathering places, and especially around music and culture, that they lifted themselves off the ground, and they got energy back, and they rebuilt themselves, and they got actually community back. People started talking with their neighbors and doing things, getting active in the PTA and all those kind of things. So when so not every building is a private property, and some had civic purposes, some had religious purposes. So when the building, the 1867 sanctuary, became available for that kind of purpose, that was something that interested me for a number of reasons.
Okay, it sounds like a worthy cause. So can you explain a little bit about exactly what is the 1867 sanctuary and how it kind of fits in? I mean, why you were drawn to that and what purposes it serves or has served in the past?
Yep. No, people in the area know it as the old Presbyterian Church in Ewing. It's on Scotch Road at the bend when Scotch Road comes down from what used to be 95 and turns into Ewing. It's surrounded by a large cemetery, the Ewing Church Cemetery, that the land for which was bought in 1709 and has some 40 plus veterans of the Revolutionary War buried there, as well as a lot of other notables, including Paul Whiteman, the jazz musician, and a number of the Roebling family, and so forth. So when we moved down here in the 1970s, late 1970s, we became a member of that church around 1980, and so I've been a member there for about 40 years. So I'm very familiar with the building and the other programs. At one point, the church leaders were very concerned about the structural integrity of the church for particular reasons. And they actually decided they didn't want to risk collapse of this big stone structure that was built 150 years ago and have it fall into the street or whatever. And so they decided to demolish the building safely.
Oh, my goodness.
And
wow.
there are so many people that go by there, whether they work at DOT or whether just from living in the area or having gone there for Christmas Eve services, whatever their connection was, is that there's got to be another way for this. And so some Preservation New Jersey, which is a statewide historic preservation advocacy organization that's been around since 1978, had a couple of architects on its board. Then some of them took a look at the place and said, there doesn't seem to be any structural problem with this place, that there was just kind of an accidental thing that happened. And so they recommended that Preservation New Jersey get involved and actually take on this place as their first physical, as they say, brick and mortar project since they were founded in 1978.
Okay.
So it is there. In May 2012, they took on a 50-year lease for the building. And so as kind of an experiment in adaptive reuse is the term of art that they use. How can you reuse the building? How can you adapt the building for a different use than it was before? Its use was as a church, but it was also, in its early days, it was the biggest building in town, and that's where they had town meetings for putting water lines in West Trenton or other things in addition to its service as a church. So we looked at at what could be done. We had a grant from the State Historic Trust as well as the Princeton Community Foundation to explore the kinds of things that could be done with a building like that. It's a good size, has 200 seats, 200 right now, and envisioned a lot of different examples, and decided that it would be great as an arts center, and because it has wonderful acoustics, and it's accessible. It's already built with wheelchair accessibility, and that let's see if we can make a go of this as a successful historic preservation project.
Wow, that's amazing. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back to learn more about the building and what you've been doing with it.
It's not about the money.
It's all about how you manage your money. Now let's get back to learning how from Kurt Baker of Certified Wealth Management and Investment with Master Your Finances.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Bob Kull, who is with the events manager at 1867 Sanctuary Arts and Culture Center. And just before the break, you're talking about how this was the first project that the New Jersey Preservation Society took on. You want to tell us a little bit about what that is and why it was created and kind of what its goal is, so to speak, right? Because that was created actually the pretty not too distant past. If you take it, from a long perspective, Right. It's not that long ago it was created. Really,
well, it was Preservation New Jersey was founded in 1978, and there's a great deal of history in New Jersey because of its location between New York and Philadelphia, as well as the many resources that the state has, and the population that established itself in centers throughout the state very early on. So a lot of people that got together, architects, historians, artisans, people involved in all kinds of aspects of history, thought that having a statewide organization to represent historic and advocate for the preservation of historic sites and districts, taking advantage of what the National Trust for Historic Preservation was doing and advocating. New Jersey set up its own affiliate of the National Trust for Historic Preservation through Preservation New Jersey. And what their role was at the beginning, they had a board of experts that when somebody wanted to establish a historic district or save a particular place, they would provide expert advice to folks. So they didn't necessarily get their hands on a particular project, but did provide an important angel kind of role, not an angel investor kind of thing, but somebody to oversee that and guide people doing these things. So they've had courses and conferences and how to do these various techniques. So when but they didn't really think they had the capacity to do their own project being scattered around the state. But when the demolition was, actually a contract for demolition was signed on the building, which was built in 1867, hence 1867 Sanctuary, they saw that there was a local group of people that was not only highly motivated, but raised about over $250,000 in the depths of the recession in 2009, good. Cash on the barrelhead, and all told, has raised about $500,000 toward the kind of repairs and operation of the building to be able to get it to open again as it did in 2016. So we're a committee of Preservation in Jersey that's focused on this particular project. So Preservation in Jersey goes on and continues its traditional role, and we're kind of a little laboratory for the kind of things that representing how adaptive reuse might work best. So we're in close touch with a lot of members of the board, even as there's turnover over the years, to continue those relationships and see how we can guide and advise other communities and other property owners how they might be able to use their historic sites. So it's not, even if you go into a downtown like a Burlington City or something, or any downtown, you see that there are building fronts that were probably somebody's house at some point, and they became a law office, and then they put bigger windows in front. It might have become a dentist's office, or it might have become a storefront, and then at some point it might even turn back to residential. So that kind of that kind of adaptation is a very common thing, and that it's actually much less expensive and much more environmentally and ecologically proper to do that than to destroy a building and build a new one, even if you build a brand new green building. There's a book called The Economics of Historic Preservation, a Community Leader's Guide, that's by Donovan Rypkema, Rypkema, who talks about the many strategies that are used and many of the compelling aspects. So it's a book you can get on Amazon or look at on placeeconomics.com that gives you all the insights of how historic preservation is really a growth strategy. There are other articles. Craftsman's blog talked about 5 worst mistakes of historic homeowners, and so one of them is taking out their original windows. And you see all the ads are, well, we can give you great new replacement windows, argon gas, high energy efficiency, but as long as you maintain your historic windows, the sliding glass windows, they're made of old growth wood, which is much more durable than any product that you have now. And as long as you maintain it, you paint it and clean it, there's actually much more and provide some weather stripping. They're much more efficient than the windows that you might put in now. And
now that's counter to what I would have thought, right? Because they have all these triple panes and they have all this stuff. They complain, they sell. They say, hey, this is the most efficient window you'll ever have, so to speak. But you're saying that's actually not true.
The other windows lasted 100 years. The new windows that they put out, you'll have to change them in 18, 20 years.
Right. So as long as you have to maintain them, obviously. So that's the difference.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, well, anything you have to maintain at some level. So that's interesting. I never would have thought of that. The old glass windows are kind of neat. So how do you, I guess you can repair them, right? So, some of that old glass I've seen, it's actually, you can tell because it's not exactly clear all the way through. I'm using the wrong word, but it's how you can actually tell it's there. Whereas newer windows, they're you can't tell because I guess windows are actually liquid, right? They actually flow down over time.
Yeah,
so the bottom becomes thicker than the top, right? So that's what I'm thinking of. That's kind of
interesting. You do have to worry about that in the 1867 sanctuary. It has beautiful stained glass windows.
Okay.
Some of which were original to the building in 1867. Right. They're the ones facing Scotch Road. The ones on the side were put in the 1960s to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the building. And so we had a glass conservator come in and say, well, there are some places where the glass is gradually, not quite melting, but it's thickening at the bottom.
Right.
So you do have to take care of the lead in there. You do have to take out the glass and fix it. So that's a potentially very very expensive project that's coming up. We did have a couple of windows that we did fix with some grant assistance to make sure they stayed stable. But it's they're beautiful and they're solid and well made. So we do the best we can to keep that resource, and it's very attractive.
Yeah, I know the Historic Society, I know that every once in a while you hear about buildings that people aren't even aware of, and then they find out there's some history behind it. So before people do things, they really should learn a little bit about the history of the building too, because I guess it's readily available in the towns, right? So do they keep track of things like that? Like, the building itself, and say, hey, do you realize what this was used for and how it, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever the case may be?
Every town has its planning office,
right.
And many towns have a historic preservation commission.
Right.
And many of those towns are a registered. They're kind of a certified historic preservation commission that got that certification working with Preservation New Jersey in the past. So they do things to make sure that they're up to date on what the opportunities are. So if somebody wanted to have their house registered as an historic site, that doesn't necessarily prevent it being used or changed in the future in terms of private property. Mm-hmm. It can affect that if the town wants to bulldoze a road through your house, then that would be a factor that would
be very rude.
Yeah, and it's one of those mitigating factors.
Right.
But it is something that recognition can help. Some people feel that it reduces its property value, but for those interested in in the history of the building, it'll actually increase the property value to those people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the older buildings are kind of interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it has some history behind it. It's kind of, I don't know, I think they're nicer in many ways. They have a lot more character. I mean, the houses we buy today, unfortunately, are literally you go 3 houses down, you're going to have the exact same house. It's not as interesting, I guess, as some of the older houses.
And usually that designation applies to what the exterior looks like and its relationship to the community. The 1867 sanctuary is not on the state or national register at this point because it's an application you need to go through. At the time we were working with the building, the money that we had for the application, we decided to put into getting the building back open again. But we do have a certificate of eligibility that we can pursue that. The building has been transformed inside a number of times since it was built. The front wall had been stenciled and solid, so nobody thought that they could keep the stenciling maintained for 100 years with candles in there or whatever they had to light the place. So the interior has changed, and even when we got the building, Preservation New Jersey got the building, then we removed some of the pews and made room in the front for a grand piano and removed some pews in the back for passing space, but and took out some carpet so that it made the sound a little bit more live. So it's a wonderful performance space. Even though the pews are original, the seating is in pews, and those are original to the building, and it really creates a really nice sound in the space.
Well, that's kind of neat. I mean, I know the historic buildings are pretty cool. Maybe when we come back, we can talk a little bit about like the types. Once you're designated historic, what things have to stay the same usually, and what things maybe you're allowed to update. Because I hear people, there's pros and cons on that. So you just have to be aware of what you can and can't do. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back.
It's not about the money, money, money.
It's all about how you manage your money. Now let's get back to learning how from Kurt Baker of Certified Wealth Management and Investment with Master
Welcome
Your
back. You're listening
Finances.
to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker here with Bob Kull, and we're talking about his historic buildings, specifically 1867 Sanctuary Arts and Culture Center, which was the first one that Preservation New Jersey actually took on as a physical project. And I just know, talking to people who have either bought or owned historic real estate, there are some things you can do and you can't do to the buildings. I think a lot of times people don't really understand it. So maybe you can tell us some of the things you've learned and maybe how that applies to this building itself, so people kind of understand things you're allowed to do typically and things that maybe you're not allowed to do. Or at least you have to ask, I guess, right?
Sure. Well, the 1867 sanctuary is kind of an oddity in the area. When it was built 2 years after the Civil War, it was the fourth house of worship on that very spot. The first one being around 1712, and then so there's a building there within sight of one of George Washington's columns when he marched on the Battle of Trenton. So when they built the building, they used locally quarried sandstone. So it's a big brownstone building in the middle of farms and forests when it was originally built. So it was really looking very much to the future. The only difference really from when it was originally built is that the original steeple was blown down in a storm, so they put a shorter steeple on the top. The church, when it had it in the 1980s, included a wheelchair ramp on the left side of the building, so that improved that access, and also installed central air conditioning as well with a big unit out the back. So those kind of things that are health and safety are allowed to be installed when you have a historic building. You just have to be sensitive to not changing the look of the building too much. And now there are heating and cooling units that can be put on the outside of buildings that just have a small separate unit and a pipe that goes to a small vent that's on the inside of the building. So it's pretty effective. So we did work with a conservator to come up with a plan for taking care of the stonework on the outside of the building. And beyond that, we also, when we looked at possible uses of the building, we looked at improving its accessibility for
Right, so you have to be ADA compliant, right? I'm assuming at some year, maybe you did it before this, but I know fairly recently, if you do anything to the building, you have to make it ADA compliant, which means you need certain ramps and certain access and things like that, right?
Right. Well, and like building codes, there are
Yeah.
certain allowances for
Right.
buildings that are where the options are limited.
Right, right.
We're working on an ADA plan for this building, although having worked with a nonprofit, Voices Corral, as president of their board for a while, and we looked at what's needed to meet the needs of the ADA needs of our people coming, but that was basically what we did in relation to our venues. So now that I'm a venue, I have to look at it in a bit of a different way.
Right.
So we are not fully ADA compliant. We are wheelchair accessible, and we made sure that we could do that. Other things to be fully ADA is to make sure we have large print programs for everything, which we have done from time to time. Sometimes projecting words that people are doing, or having an interpreter, or kind of a closed caption kind of thing, which we haven't had the resources to do or the demand to do at this point. But those are things that we could look at in the future.
Okay, so what types of activities have you actually started doing at the building? I mean, when you went through all this, obviously you preserved it, and it's an arts center like that. Now, so what types of things are actually happening there, and how are we using the building now, since things are a little different than they were when it was built?
Right. Well, we're not part of the church anymore, so people ask about that. They see people walk into it and they think, "Oh, is there a mass going on?" No, we're trying to amass people for a concert or something. So we mostly get the revenues to operate the building through concert ticket sales, through event rentals, through memberships, and through donations that may be restricted or unrestricted. And we're in our last quarter of our third year in operating the building. And so our attendance is less than we need to have to really sustain the building at this point. But people say that when I talk to other people with other venues, it often takes maybe, like a small business, takes maybe 6 years before you hit your tipping point to know that you're going to be able to go forward. And some arts venues have said, well, it's taken them longer for people to trust that they present good people. So we've consistently had good people. We have artists that have heard about us and come from as far away as Rome, Italy, and Sydney, Australia, Northern Ontario, down to Buenos Aires. So they regard the acoustics of our place favorably to Carnegie Hall.
Oh my gosh! That's
And
fantastic.
although it's at 200 seats, and they don't have to rent that at that price, and the parking's free for people that come across the street. So the expenses that are primarily for heat and insurance or air conditioning, as I said, we're centrally air conditioned, comes to nearly $5,000 a month to operate the building. So while some months we're in the black operationally, there may be some repairs or infrastructure improvements that we need to make, but we're not to the point that we're sustaining ourselves yet, although the trends are in the right direction. So with 3 years under our belt and going to our fourth year, we're now looking. We can't be invested in for a financial return like a for-profit enterprise. But what we can do is people that might invest in us through sponsorships or advertising or whatever are presented in a good light by if they want to advertise in our concert programs or underwrite a series or a specific special event or something. So those are things that we're looking to put together packages to be able to do for individuals or organizations or businesses in the area, because we've established, I think, a good reputation, and we're pretty well known, although we're still getting people in for the first time. We have a very active website at 1867sanctuary.org. We've got an email list of about 2,500 addresses, a social media following on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, of about that same amount. That's very active. You'll see a lot of clips from shows there. We advertise monthly in US 1, in the Evening Observer, and also for the Jersey Jazz Society magazine for our jazz concerts. So yeah, we get a lot of outreach there. So
Did you have a lot of repeat, like, because I'm just thinking like out loud, because like we hold an event every year at a place, and so something how it adds up. So you have certain concerts, you have corporate events and things like that where people, if they do it once, it might be like a recurring type event they may have. Because I would think that's how you could kind of build a little bit of a base. You know, if a business says or a concert says, "Hey, we're going to come back every September," then you've kind of got something to build on, right? And then people go, "Oh, well, I know there's going to be whatever a jazz concert in the fall," and they go, "Oh, great, let's go to that," right? And
well, we're
things
starting
like that.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 20 concerts a month in there.
Oh
so
wow, that's a decent amount. That's a lot.
And I'll get on average 2 requests to perform in the space a day.
Okay.
Which we usually have concerts on Friday nights, Saturday nights,
Right.
Sunday afternoons, and then some Saturday afternoons, and
Okay.
sometimes Wednesday nights. So that's a limited supply for really a lot of demand.
Right. True.
By excellent artists. But we want to, we can't. Well, the quality of the artists is excellent, and I'll audition them by video and so forth. A lot of them are names that people haven't heard of before, so I'll put a video of them up on the website and in our social media and our email blast, so that people are introduced to them, so that they know that this is someplace you might be desirable to spend $20 on, or general admission, or cheaper for our members. And if you're a student, such as a writer student or a high school student, it's only $5. So
that's very expensive.
We're a great cheap date.
That's for sure. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, so you have a lot of events going on there, and you're really connecting to the community and so forth. So, that's amazing. You've been listening to Master Your Finances, and we're going to be right back.
It's not about the money, money, money.
It's all about how you manage your money. Now let's get back to learning how from Kurt Baker of Certified Wealth Management and Investment with Master Your
Welcome back and
Finances.
listen to Master Your Finances. Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. I'm here with Bob Kull, who's the events manager at 1867 Sanctuary Arts and Culture Center with the Preservation, New Jersey. And it's interesting. So you renovated the building, you got it up and running. You kind of saved it, really. And now you're using it for concerts and things like that. So what other types of activities are actually going on there? And you're kind of like really 3 years into this growth thing. People are finding out about you. They're starting to do more and more events there and things like that. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So in addition to being a land use planner, sitting here with a financial planner, I'm becoming an event planner as well.
You like that word planner, don't you?
Well, it's that forward-looking thing.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And we have a 200-seat capacity. That's not movable seats, but it's but for concert and event venues. Nationally, that's a sweet spot. A lot of places are too small, maybe 50 seats, or there'll be 1,000 seats and nobody can afford it.
Right.
So it's really it fits a good niche for so many different kind of concerts, as well as small theater productions, kind of like the one-act plays or the one-set plays, and a lot of life events. We have 2 weddings this December. We've had a number of funerals and memorial services, and located within the bounds of a cemetery, that becomes convenient. We've also had a couple of bar mitzvahs already in that place. We're the rehearsal home for 2 regional choruses. In April, we'll be hosting our 3rd international young artist competition for chamber musicians. So basically kids from 6 to not so much kids and 30 years old. But the winners of those competitions have won instruments worth several $1,000s, or they get to be on stage in Carnegie Hall or Disney Hall in Los Angeles or in Seoul, Korea, or in halls in Europe as a result of their performance. So it's the Global Music Partnership puts that together. And so it's also been a favorite space for recording albums, one that has been a live jazz album recorded there, and then there was a studio session album recorded by the Jack Furlong Quartet. We are also have some of our jazz concerts are recorded for radio broadcast on WWFM, their Jazz on 2 station that goes internet largely, but it's HD2. And so Robert Bullington has a show that's on the fifth Sundays. So he's been using jazz artists like Richie Cole or Mauricio de Souza's Bossa Brazil or some of the other interesting jazz musicians. He'll do a show that broadcasts from their live performance, but also interviews with the artists. So it's been an exciting ride, and we are looking at ways that we can continue to do that, including with singer-songwriters, folk musicians, other aspects. We're looking at webcasting of concerts and seeing if that's something that will encourage people to not just stay home and watch their Netflix or their computer, but to actually to separate from their couches and come and enjoy the things that you have in a live concert that you can't get by watching it on the tube or listening to it through your headphones. Because even the sound in the place, I'll say with an acoustic concert, I'll say at one point, shut your eyes, because the sound's not just coming from the stage, but it's bouncing off the walls in particular ways that is just spectacular. So it's the idea of the adaptive reuse is to transform a 152-year-old historic landmark building, not just as an old dead thing, but as a living legacy. So it's something that's very active and that showcases the creativity and the legacy of live artists and the attractiveness that arts and culture bring to our communities. It becomes a vibrant space and a vibrant community. So we look forward to being a positive role model in the same way that Dar Williams talked about these places in other communities throughout the country and on her tours.
So have you seen a lot of the community people really embrace this, the local people in Ewing and places like that? Because you don't, in this area, you don't think of Ewing, you're going to go to a nice concert hall, which now you've got one, right?
Yeah.
So you've kind of got this little piece that wasn't really there before. So how is the surrounding community kind of embrace this new feel, right, where you got a little bit more vibrancy at the building that maybe really wasn't, it was used a totally different way?
People come in and they are, when they come in for the first time, they're glowing with all the things that that they've experienced and say what a wonderful experience it was. And the artists feel that way too, compared to a lot of places where they play clubs and bars and restaurants where people don't really hear them and there's a lot of noise. The artists can hear themselves and they have an audience that's very appreciative and attentive of what they're doing, and will even buy their CDs that we have in the back. So what we're working hard on now is how the stickiness of people actually the behavioral modification to say that it's safe to go out. It's a good thing to go out. And actually, since we started, we found that there are many more opportunities for live music in Mercer County than there were when we started 3 years ago, even 3 years ago. We have a particular niche of the kind of concert environment that we have, but I think that as we work with behavioral modification of people in the community, and they say, oh, this is a great thing to do, and it's not an expensive place to go, and the parking is free, and we even have free snacks at intermission.
Wow.
So come on out, and And if you want to have your event there, we'll have a lot of people that come for events. We have an open mic on the fourth Fridays of each month, except for December, because that's too close to Christmas. So we kick that into January. But we have a lot of great talent that comes to the open mics. We now working through the Trenton the African American Cultural Center of Mercer County.
Right.
And Todd Evans, they now have a poetry open mic that they had been holding. They're still holding in Starbucks, I think, in Trenton.
Wow.
But they're holding one at the 1867 Sanctuary, usually on the third Wednesdays of each month. So all these things you could see up on our website, or join our email list. I send out one email a week that I don't burden anybody, but just profiles highlights the upcoming shows. And if you want to book a show, then my booking information is available from the website as well. And happy to talk to anybody about anything.
Well, that's fantastic. I know one thing that you mentioned over and over again in different ways is that some of these older buildings that people forget that we didn't have microphones and speakers and all these things. So literally, if somebody's talking from the pulpit, you had to design the building acoustically in a way that everybody could hear you. Like the person in the last pew could hear you just as well as the person in the first. And there's a lot of engineering that goes behind that, a lot of material engineering and things like that isn't necessarily thought out as carefully in most buildings. You kind of just put up a box and then you figure it out later, right? Then you adjust. They don't really design the building for acoustics where, back in the day when they built this building, it sounds like that's the way it was designed, and it sounds like they did a really good job with it.
It's great for people with theatrical voices,
Right.
Or that sing up front. And we've actually removed the pulpit and the lectern from the front to make a wider space and a more open space that gets sound out better. So it's a very welcoming place. It doesn't. At that time, building Presbyterian churches, it was very, very plain inside.
Right.
So there's not a lot of religious iconography except for the windows, which you don't even see at night.
Right.
So it's a comfortable space for people to come in, and so we've our heating is in the steam heat that's underneath the pews, so everybody that's seated is comfortable as long as they don't put their feet on the metal pipes and melt themselves to melt their shoes to the pews. But it's but we do also recognize that it is in pews and not fully stretch out seating for most places. That we do have an intermission in shows to make sure that people aren't sitting for more than an hour and you can get up and walk around. We also, in addition to the wheelchair accessibility, we do have cutouts in the middle of the aisle for people for wheelchair access or people that need the additional space.
Well, that's fantastic. Bob, I appreciate you coming on today and talking about how we took an old historic building and saved it. First of all, you saved it, and thank you for that, first of all. And
that's a work in progress.
They didn't tear it down yet, so that's a big deal. And now you've repurposed it, and now you're bringing back a cultural center. So it's kind of like a win-win on lots of levels, on a physical level as well as on a cultural level. And you're getting a lot more younger people, it sounds like, a lot of these bands and people coming out and doing community activities. And I'm sure it's for all ages, but I love the fact that people are getting out, and you've got the price point where it's not too expensive. So pretty much anybody can come out and do it. So you've been listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. I can be reached, their website, which is cwmi.us. You can listen to this podcast and all the podcasts at masteryourfinances.us. And remember, together we can master your finances so you can enjoy financial peace of mind.
It's hard to keep up with the fast-paced financial world, but because of Master Your Finances, you have a head start. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, our certified financial planner professional. Only on 107.7 The Bronx and 107.7thebronx.com. Tune in next week, Sunday at 9 a.m. to get a boost on your financial planning. But if you missed a week, you can check out past episodes. Just go to masteryourfinances.us to check out past episodes and more. Master Your Finances is underwritten by Certified Wealth Management and Investment LLC. Money doesn't grow on trees, but it can grow your portfolio. Thanks to Kurt Baker and Master Your Finances. On Sundays at 9 a.m. exclusively on 107.7